Welcome to the Vault podcast and review, because this is a combo show. We're just going to jump right into it. Today we're going to be talking about if established artists putting out new music matters in music industry today. And followed by that, we're going to review the new Dee Snider track, To Hell and Back. And we'll get into all that. But before we do, your host, Zan Morning. As always, Brent's with us. Brent, what do you think about this interesting combo show we're doing?
Oh, I think it'll be a good time. It's something that I know you had posted a picture on the Facebook page a while back that kind of got into some of this, like talking about like new music, like, people that say there's no new, like good new music and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of people kind of having that argument, I think, right now. So it's a good time. It'll be a good show.
So as always, the vaultmusic1@gmail.com is where you can send us any kind of questions, comments, anything. If you want us to review a certain album, or if you have some suggestions, anything like that, please send us some emails. On Twitter, @thevaultmusic1, facebook.com/thevaultrvws, and you can hear us on YouTube, Podomatic, and Stitcher on your mobile devices. Please take the time to follow, subscribe, share, leave us a rating. That'd really help us out. So let's jump right into it. A lot of times it seems like we see this with 80s artists. They will put out new music, and it just kind of seems to fall to deaf ears, so to speak. This was kind of brought to my attention once again by Dee Snider. I'm a huge fan of Snider Comments, which is his podcast he does. I recommend you all check it out, just in general, even if you're not necessarily wanting to hear about metal. He's got a lot of interesting stories on there, and it's just good stuff. So he did a show about, he put out this new track, To Hell and Back, and he put it out for free on his website. And a lot of his fans, I guess, streamed it and listened to it and, gave him, yeah, this is good, or this isn't that great, whatever. But people, were not downloading it. So, I mean, look at this. You have a free track that people don't even want to take the time to download. So that begs the question that he brings up. Are old artists putting out new music, is that relative Is it relative in 2015? Are people interested in it? And Brent, I'll just let you kind of give your thoughts on that.
I think it all just depends. Because you see some, kind of your old school, death metal and heavy metal bands and stuff. We did a review on Fear Factory, last week or something.
Yeah.
And, they're a fairly old band. They're considered, veterans. They're not, new kids on the block well, that's a bad reference.
Hey, I like New Kids on the Block.
Hey, NKOTB till I die, baby. But you know what I'm saying? They're not, the fresh upstarts, with the new album and the corporation behind them, right, and this and that. And, they put out a good, solid album that I think is being really well received. But then again, like you said, you take this Dee Snider tune and nobody really seems to care. And Dee Snider's still popular. Like you said, he's got the podcast. He's still doing the House of Hair stuff, isn't he?
Yeah, still doing the House of Hair. He's still involved in Christmas musicals and still doing appearances and stuff like that. And he's still performing, at festivals and everything. So, I mean, he's still relevant.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're not dealing with somebody, I don't know, the lead singer from the 80s of a band that will...
Odin.
Yeah, well, there's that. But, anywho, there's some 80s stuff that probably should have stayed buried that ended up just playing the old stuff, and they just look like they should have stayed in the 80s. But anyway, so I think it all depends on the tune and stuff, honestly. I love to hear some of the old dudes come out and do it. Take even, just to go to a totally different kind of music thing. I mean, how old's Wino at this point?
I really don't know, but I see your point.
And, I mean, even look at, Pentagram just released a new album.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being pretty well received among the, its, kind of niche community and stuff. So I think it all just entirely depends. As far as the relevance, honestly, I think with some of them, especially, and Dee Snider may fall into this category, kind of especially him. Because, I mean, if you look at Twisted Sister and how they dressed and the songs they did and stuff like that, he's instantly pigeonholed because of that.
That's a good point, yeah.
most people aren't going to think, oh, well, he does these really awesome Christmas specials. He's doing these, really awesome podcasts. He's doing this actually very well-informed House of Hair stuff. They don't necessarily think of that unless they're an actual fan of his, not just somebody acquainted with Twisted Sister, if that makes any sense. Right. So I think it all depends on A, the song and the quality of music they're putting out, and B, kind of what they think of with this guy. You see a lot of old bands really get stuck having to play the old stuff because that's all people want to hear. And they play the new stuff and they're like, oh, you suck. And, it's kind of sad at times, but sometimes the new music does just suck.
Yeah, and I think a lot the kind of flip side of that is I think people are just lazy. Like they don't want to find out about new bands. They're like, we'll just use Twisted Sister, for example. They're just going to say, play I Want to Rock, play We're Not Going to Take It. And that's all they care about. They don't even care about some of their other really good songs that they had on those albums that were extremely popular. And so I think a lot of that boils down to just lack of caring about music in general, which maybe is just a product of our society nowadays. I'm not sure. I mean, back in the day, even when we were, in high school, when new music came out, regardless of the genre or whether you liked it or not, like you listened to it because you were curious. You wanted to see what it was all about. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think that a lot of these established older artists are going to find success in the niche. And I think that's kind of what Dee Snider is. I mean, if you are a diehard 80s metal fan, Dee Snider, and you're probably going to follow most of what's going on with the current 80s bands that are still around, that are still doing projects here and there. So I think they can find a lot of success in the niche market. But overall, I mean, I don't know what to say other than I think it's really sad as a music fan to see people just not caring, not even bothering to download a free song. You know what I mean? Like that's what really got me is that he couldn't even get people to download a free track. And, it's not cheap from my understanding, even if you're recording and producing these things yourself. Right. It takes time and effort to put into this form of art that you are aspiring to put out, and people just they're so out of it that they don't even want to download it for free. So what else do you got on that aspect of it?
I can see that, but then again, you've also got to think music's kind of it's also different now. I mean, you have totally different markets, I think, even than you used to have, and you've got your people who want your kind of your bro country, your pop music. They want that. And then you have some of your other people who are, and I don't mean this bad because I actually kind of fall into this category a little bit myself, but you're kind of people that want to find obscure new stuff that nobody's ever heard of that has 5 views on YouTube. And I think, honestly, there's a big split there. And so if he's not going to get a whole lot of radio play, call that the pop side, then I don't know that it's going to be that popular. If he can't get radio stations to play, and maybe he can, I don't know. I honestly don't. But to show you how it is, I had never even heard of it until you told me about it. Mm-hmm. And
there you go. There's a prime example. I mean,
exactly. And, I don't consider myself lazy in music. Yeah, I've missed a lot of albums and stuff that I really wish I hadn't. But, I still keep up with a lot of, your big news sources and stuff that tend to cover this stuff. And I hadn't heard anything about it. Mm-hmm. So, if it's not, it almost has to be like really, really popular or really, really unpopular. And, things that are kind of in the middle. And I would throw, this kind of in there, and Dee Snider in there really kind of too. It's just kind of stuck in the middle. And I think a lot of your older acts end up stuck there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So let's jump into the review. I mean, did you have anything else you wanted to say about established artists before we get started in the review?
Not really. I mean, honestly, I've said pretty much everything I can think of on it. It's something that, I like to see whenever some old bands can put out fantastic music, and especially in the age that's dominated by your kind of corporate albums, mm-hmm. like especially like your bro country, and it's even gotten into your rock and stuff like that. It's it's basically made by focus groups,
Right.
It's, well, these are the words we have to have in. These are the, quote unquote emotions or the passions we have to try to, relay through the music. This is the song structure we have to have. And in some forms, there is a flat out concerted effort. Hell, even George Strait sang about it like the 70s or something. And that's actually something else, just to kind of take a tangent from my main point there. I don't think you see this as bad in country music as you do in rock. Like you kind of traditional country music. Because, look how long George Strait has been putting out music. And look at Willie Nelson and all those guys. They don't ever really seem to get pigeonholed like that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think you're right as far as the key word you've used is traditional.
Yeah.
Because the new country is exactly what you were just talking about.
Right. And then you get people like Blake Shelton calling people who want to listen to the old style, old farts and jackasses.
Exactly. Yep.
And so, I think that all ties into it as well. But no, I love seeing legitimate, I say legitimate, screw it. I mean, legitimate entertainers, songwriters, singers, musicians, whatever. People like, your Dee Sniders, your Winos, your Pentagrams, your Fear Factories, all them being able to put out solid, good, fantastic music whenever, and they're writing it without the corporations behind them.
Right.
And so I may not like all the stuff that, they necessarily put out, but I love it when they can do that because I think it sends the message to people who want to do it the right way, who don't want to just make a few bucks with 15 minutes of fame and then nobody remember who they are 5 years from now.
Right.
I think it says, well, yeah, you can do this, but I think it's getting harder and harder. And that may actually be why a lot of these old people, you don't, their new stuff they come out with, you don't hear about because nobody cares because they don't have the corporations and the record labels back there pushing them.
Well, and it could also be that, they're afraid to change, and that can go both ways. I mean, yeah. I'm not sure. Did you check out the last Rat album that came out a couple years ago?
No, I don't believe I did. If I did, okay. I don't remember it.
It had enough of the key elements that used to sound like Rat. So when I listened to it, or Striper, the latest, the newer Striper stuff's the same thing. It had those key elements that you remembered, but they also updated with the times a little bit. It wasn't lyrical content was different. Everything kind of just updated with the times a little bit, but still had the classic sound. And from my understanding, both of those albums did pretty well, all things considering the music industry now.
Yeah.
And we'll transition into the review now with that. And I think that's one thing that Dee Snider did really well. And our review here, again, is To Hell and Back, which is the single that came out from Dee Snider just this year. And this is just straightforward rock and roll. I mean, there is no Twisted Sister ripoff or no 80s. No, this is straightforward rock and roll. He did catch some comparisons to like Glenn Danzig or Jim Morrison on this with his vocal style. So that right there should tell you this is not Twisted Sister, right. Part Definitely. 9 or whatever like that. Yeah. So what'd you think of his vocals and just your first impressions?
Honestly, my first impression of the song is it's very middle of the road. That was my first impression. But yeah, I was actually impressed because I a band like Twisted Sister, you don't want to see like, how old is Dee Snider now?
I don't know.
I mean, you don't know how old he is mainly because, who knows what he's done to his body throughout the years when he was, really famous and touring hard and stuff. But, he's pushing at least like 60s, right? I mean, 60s, 70s, maybe even.
60s.
Yeah.
I would say.
And, I don't want to see a 60-year-old dude, dressing up like they used to at Twisted Sister. That's just not kosher for me. Unless it's on WWE, and then that's But, in all seriousness, though, I'm actually really glad he did something different. That he didn't, he could have stuck with the old Twisted Sister shtick and the kind of sound, the simplistic music, and, just played on the old famous songs and this and that. But he didn't. He actually put out something else, something different. And like it or not, I at least respect him for doing that.
I thought the vocals were, like I said, an interesting change. What did you think of those? I bet you weren't expecting that style, were you?
I wasn't at all, actually. I was not. I was, like I said, it was impressive to hear him do something different. And I thought it was all right. So
I thought he sounds really good, too. Like his voice has really held up over the years. Do you agree?
Yep, I do.
Production, top of the notch, really, and
Yeah.
that may in fact be part of the detriment. Maybe that's just me. A lot of times when I hear older groups, I want their recording quality to sound like it did back in the day. And now I know that's a natural progression, but
Right.
we'll take Fear Factory. They've essentially sounded this. Their quality has essentially been the same throughout their entire career.
Yeah.
Pentagram, I mean, they're up until their last couple releases, it was pretty much the same kind of stuff, with the exception of like the demos or
Right.
something like that. But their style may change a little bit, but that quality has always been the same. It doesn't sound overproduced, if you hear the first Saint Vitus album, it sounds like the newest Saint Vitus album.
Right.
Like, maybe there was they changed things up a little bit, but the production was always kind of there. It didn't sound overproduced. But, if you take like some 80s thrash band and then all of a sudden they put something out brand new, like I can tell you right off the bat, I can think of like Onslaught. Like a lot of the really old Onslaught stuff, which I know is obscure in the first place, is really just gritty and crusty and has that awesome 80s thrash feel. And then they re-record it or they put out a new recording, and it's so like crisp and everything that it just sounds like another metal band. Like it kind of takes some of that away. Do you think that's the case on this or not? I think really this is almost like it's a whole new project, so I don't think you can really knock it for it in that case.
No, I don't knock it. Honestly, I don't. But one thing I was thinking of the entire time you were talking is Metallica.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
And because you listen to the first three albums, and I used to be one of those guys that I had to have the nice big, stereo car systems or car stereo systems. I speak in correct order, promise. Anyway, I used to have, the big stereo, car stereo system and everything. You could hear me like a long way away. I'm half deaf because of it. And one thing you never did was listen to like the first three Metallica albums in a high quality stereo like that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because it's just like, and it came out like a garbled mess. You're better off turning the bass down. It was the way it was recorded. And part of that was just the time frame it was coming out and stuff. The other part was just their music. And then you go to almost overproduced with like the Black Album and even like, your load and reloads. And then you go to the entirely opposite spectrum back to Saint Anger, which was the most underproduced thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And, so, there's an old band trying to put out new stuff. And, look at what happened to Metallica specifically. They were panned a little bit with And Justice for All. Then they put out the Black Album, which is totally different than, the first three, the real core albums that everybody seems to love. And, they swore them off. And then, by God, they cut their hair and they don't do solos in Load and Reload, and everybody hates them. Now, part of that was the whole fiasco with Napster and stuff like that, even though I don't necessarily think they were wrong. So, there's a prime example of people not wanting a band to change, but them actually progressing according to what they feel they need to do. Now, I think, everything they put out's been fairly decent, minus Saint Anger. But
which wasn't that bad, really, if it wasn't for just the snare sound.
yeah, honestly. And did you actually hear a guy redid the entire Saint Anger's album track for track? Drum track, guitar track, vocal track, everything by himself, single-handedly, played every note the exact same, except took the snare out. Have you actually heard that?
I've seen it posted, and I was trying to listen to it for some reason. I was having some problems with the website or whatever I was on, but so I haven't actually heard it, but I know of it.
It is honestly, it's completely day and night. You wouldn't think it's the same album. And honestly, as far as like the way the music's written and what they were trying to express in that album with what was going on in their lives at the time, I think it was some of their best work, honestly. But then you have Lars that's like, hey, let's make the snare sound like crap. Just like, hey, let's take all the bass out of, so no one can tell, that we even have a bass in, And Justice for All. So, but as far, I don't know how I ended up getting all the way to there. But back to this and everything. No, I think their production's fine. I don't think you necessarily have to have your gritty stuff or your dirty stuff or overproduced. I thought it was fairly well done, honestly, as far as the production values were on the Dee Snider song.
So yeah, let's go ahead and give this a review. I think we've pretty much given all our comments on that. 1 star being the worst, 5 stars being the best, according to the Vault star rating system. What do you give this album or this track?
I'm going to give it a 3. I don't really care for the song over much, but I will give him credit for doing something completely different, releasing it for free, trying to prove a point, and doing something new. So I think it's a 3. It wasn't anything I absolutely fell in love with. I think it's kind of a little generic, kind of middle of the road type song. But you know what? I'll give him some props for doing it.
That's exactly what I have, a 3. I think it's middle of the road. I think it's a pretty good song. Nothing earth shattering, nothing terrible. Just really good. I did take the time to download it because he said people were not, and I'm not going to be one of those people. I'm going to try to continue to support music as much as I can. It is hard, like you said, to keep up. And I'm going to do a whole show on this. So definitely stay tuned for that. I'm going to teach everybody how to be a music fan again. So anything else before we get out of here?
No, just, it's free. It's not going to cost you a damn thing. Go download it. Show a little bit of love to a legend. And if you like it, great. If you don't, fine. But it's a free song. Download it and, at least show that, you care a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. Support music any way you can. And I mean, it's free and you may think, oh, well, I'm not going to support him. But a lot of times those download numbers, those clicks, they do matter on the grand scheme of things. So definitely check this out and check out a lot of our older reviews and podcasts. If you're a first time listener or whatever, go back and check us out. You can find all of this stuff for free at YouTube, Podomatic, and Stitcher on your mobile devices. So just search The Vault or The Vault Reviews or The Vault Podcast. You're probably going to get us to pop up on one of those. So thanks again for listening, and subscribe so you can get notifications when our new shows are coming out and new announcements and all that kind of stuff. Thanks again for listening. See you later.
Peace.